Okay, we would like to welcome you to the October 3rd, 2018 Calaveras Council of Governments meeting. Our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you stand and join us. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or interested party may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for further discussion. Do we have any items being requested to be removed? Any public interested in removing a consent agenda item? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Immunities.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Sherman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Our next item is public comment. Public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes per person and that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council and not on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment this evening? Okay. Our next item is a minute order approving the fiscal year 2018-19 operations budget amendment number 1. Ms. Collins.
All right, good evening, Council. This is amendment number 1 of the fiscal year 2018-19 operations budget. I'll refer you to attachment 6A, which shows the changes from the final 18-19 budget to the amendment number 1. I'll refer you to line item 5001, where you see a change of $6,237. This is due to 2 reasons. One, there was an additional cost in this line item of $5,762 for the executive director contract amendment that was approved at the last council meeting. And the second change is $12,000 of this line item is being transferred from savings of not having a transportation planner to line item 5002 for extra hire assistance. And those are the significant changes I wanted to point out, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Council questions on operations budget amendment number 1? Any public comment? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2018-19 operations budget amendment number 1?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Immunities.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Mills. Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Item number 7, resolution fiscal year 19-7, approving the fiscal year 18-19 overall work program amendment number 1 and overall work program agreement with Caltrans. Ms. Collins.
All right, thank you. The council approved the 18-19 OWP in June of 2018. We always bring an OWP amendment in October to reflect the year-end carryover balances. And we also take that opportunity to make any additional adjustments in the work elements as needed. So we did provide an additional copy of the spreadsheet for you. This spreadsheet's on packet page 49 as well, but it's a little difficult to read, so we got you a bigger copy here. So I'll refer you to that very top line item of carryover funds and project carryover balances that show the carryovers in the different funding sources. There have been some adjustments to work elements, number 10 and 11. There's been added scopes for transit planning and an added scope for short-range transit plan update. Work element number 13 is new. It was a planning grant that was awarded to Tuolumne County Transportation Council. It's a 5-county planning effort that we're participating in, and the cash match is being divided amongst the 5 counties, and so we're being asked to support $6,898 of that project. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions on the OWP amendment number 1.
Council? Okay. Any public comment on the 2018-19 overall work program amendment number 1? Okay, seeing that, this is being asked to have an approval for a resolution. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Moniz,
Second, Mr. Chair.
second by Councilmember Calaveras. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Item number 8, resolution fiscal year 19-8, opposing Proposition 6, the California voter approval for gas and car tax increases. Ms. Collins.
All right, thank you. This item is being brought to you for your information on the impacts of a valid proposition on the November ballot, Proposition 6, and to discuss impacts on transportation funding, particularly here for Calaveras County, and also bringing you for your consideration to take a position on this proposition. So Proposition 6, termed the voter approval for increases in gas and car tax, will essentially require the legislature to submit any measure enacting specific taxes or fees on gas or diesel fuel or on the privilege to operate a vehicle on public highways to the electorate for approval. So essentially, in the future, any time the state has a need to increase taxes or fees on transportation, this would include any type of funding revenue source would have to go to a 2/3 vote of legislature, approval by the governor, and then approval of the general election. Why this is so important to the COG is because this proposition would effectively repeal the recently increased gas tax revenues termed SB1 that was passed in 2017, because this proposition is retroactive to January of 2017. So I thought it would be important to kind of just walk you through quickly, and I know this council's been very fully aware of SB1. We've had some presentations on SB1 in the past, and this council has also lived through the time before SB1 and understands how important this legislation was for us. But really, I think it's important for us to kind of establish the purpose behind SB1. What were the main driving forces? There were really 2 main driving forces. In 2008, there was a local streets and roads needs assessment that was conducted, and it was updated most recently in 2016 to educate the legislatures on the need for roads. And really what those reports found were that our roads are deteriorating, and I know that's no surprise to anybody here who lives in California. There's a large maintenance backlog that is growing, and revenue was not adequate to cover that. And they identified in the 2016 report $132 billion backlog in needed repairs for both that covered state highways and local roads. In Calaveras County's portion of that, their 10-year unfunded need was identified over $300 million. And the other driving force behind SB1 was that gas tax was, and I guess to a lesser extent still is, a declining revenue source. And this is our main source for transportation funding. So I know this is a tough chart to see, but all you really need to know is kind of the red areas are counties that are in the poorest condition of roads. The blue areas are the counties that are at risk. Green is good, and yellow is excellent, and there's no yellow you see on there. So 2008 is on the left, and then 2016 is on the right. And really just the story behind this is green is going away, blue and red are growing. So that means our roads are deteriorating. And I'll get to this next slide. So this slide is just really to discuss the importance of preventative maintenance for our local road system. The chart on the right, that line, that kind of drops down. You see the green is good, excellent condition if roads are kept and prevented and maintained at a regular rate and basis. And then red obviously is failed, where it needs complete reconstruction. So that line is really just showing, okay, over a 20-year period, if you start off in good condition, brand new road, you do nothing, then it ends up at the poor condition. And to maintain a road in good condition, it's $2 to $4 per square yard. When it gets to the bad, it's $100 per square yard. So, one example is, let's say you have a new road, you maintain it, $4 per square yard every 5 years. Over 20 years, that's $16 per square yard. If you do nothing, in 20 years, you're at potentially $100 per square yard. So pay less now, you pay more later. So I think that's the story behind preventative maintenance. So the other significant reason behind SB1 is declining revenue sources. This has been declining for some time. The 18-cent per gallon gas tax that was set in 1994 is currently worth about 9 cents when it was adjusted for inflation and the increased mileage of vehicles. So we're seeing an increase in vehicle miles traveled, but a decrease in fuel consumption because of fuel-efficient vehicles and electric vehicles. So essentially, no fuel consumption, we don't get the tax revenue, but there's more impact to our roads. And so SB1, what it essentially did, you see that blue line there was the 18 cents per gallon since 1994. SB1 brought that up to 30 cents to meet the line, that yellow line there, or orange line, is what the gas tax would have been if it was tied to inflation. SB1 background, these kind of hard to see, but really 2 years of negotiations between the Senate and Assembly and the governor ended up being enacted in April of 2017. I think there were several packages on the table, and SB1 definitely went through several iterations before it got to the final package, required a 2/3 vote of the legislature, and you can see in the Senate and Assembly it wasn't a full 100% vote on that one. SB1 increased several of the revenue sources. Here, we've talked about this in the past, an increase in diesel excise tax by 20 cents, a 12-cent per gallon increase in the gasoline excise tax, and it's inflation adjusted to restore, the tax's purchasing power. A transportation improvement fee tax on annual registration, and then $100 per year annual zero-emission vehicle registration charge for vehicles who wouldn't contribute towards the gas tax, and then a 4% rate increase on sales tax on diesel fuel. So what this did, here we go, raised $5.2 billion per year. The other number you'll see is $52 billion over the 10-year period, just to give people a number, but SB1 doesn't end after 10 years, it's in perpetuity. They've calculated the new taxes on average would cost California drivers $10 per month. This is a stable source of revenues adjusted for inflation. 50% of the funds go to state infrastructure and 50% go directly to local agencies. The emphasis of SB1 is fix it first, obviously deferred maintenance. You saw one of the reasons SB1 came about. Enhanced trade corridors, transit, some of the funding goes towards transit, some goes towards active transportation, so that's bike and ped improvements, and then repairing local roads is really an important piece to this legislation. No funds raised go to high-speed rail, and they did, through SB1, appoint an inspector general to ensure the funds are spent transparently and there's accountability. So you've seen these charts as well, 52 billion over 10 years, where that goes. Half of it, 26 billion, goes to state programs, broken out into these different pots. That very top one, the State Highway Operations and Protection Program, the SHOP, is one of Caltrans' main funding sources for repairing and improving our state highways here in Calaveras County, and we benefit greatly from that program. There are several other trade corridors and congested corridor programs. The State Transportation Improvement Program is Caltrans' share of the STIP. That goes to large highway improvement projects. And then local cities and roads get the other half, 26 billion over 10 years. And I'll show you in a few slides here how Calaveras has benefited from this, but half of that goes to local streets and road maintenance and rehab projects, and then there are multiple other competitive funding programs that we can benefit from. Proposition 6 was passed in June, and that was a part of the SB1 legislation to pass a constitutional amendment to lock the funding and prevent them from ever being diverted to other non-transportation purposes. So these funds are constitutionally protected, and the COG board did pass a resolution of support for Prop 69 in May. Senate Bill 1, obviously a lot of projects are underway, filling potholes, repairs, doing major infrastructure improvements. I'm sure if you've traveled throughout the state recently, you've seen the SB1 signs throughout the different communities. There's over 6,000 plus projects, and we'll go into why you should care about this in Calaveras County. Here is a comprehensive list of all the projects funded to date in Calaveras County. So this is since SB1 began collecting revenues in November of 2017. So this reflects really a year and a half of funding for fiscal year 17-18 and 18-19. These numbers are hard to read. So the top two is really Angels Camp has received about $90,000 for local streets and roads repairs, and they have elected to put that on repaving and reconstructing Acorn Drive in Angels Camp. The county's hasn't received, but they've been allocated over $3 million for local street and road maintenance, and they're here today to talk to you about their projects that they're doing at the county. And those two are formulaic programs. The local jurisdictions have absolute control over the project list and what projects they elect for that funding. The COG, City and County have received over $500,000 in planning grant projects. Those are going to a project in Valley Springs, Angels Camp, and here in San Andreas. Angels Camp received $1.9 million for construction on State Route 49 for sidewalk gap fill. There are, 4 projects here from Caltrans that account for over $1.5 million on repairs, culvert replacements in multiple locations, bridge upgrades, and replacements. Calaveras Transit has benefited. There's a new State of Good Repair program that goes towards maintenance and capital improvements. Calaveras Transit's received $121,000 so far, and under that program. And then there's also augmentation of an existing funding program for operations and capital for transit, and Transit's received $334,000 out of that. So Calaveras County, over just this first year and a half, have received nearly $8 million in funding for projects on our local roads and state highways. And I would like to invite Mr. Matt Boyer, the County Interim Public Works Director, to kind of discuss the county's SB1 projects and what they're doing.
Thank you, Amber. Members of the council, I am Matt Boyer, the Interim Public Works Director for the county. It's a pleasure to be here today. So we wanted to just briefly identify what our first year SB1 program is, and then tell you a little bit about contextually how those projects will get on the ground. I think for context, it's probably fair to say this council and certainly the 2 supervisors understand some of the challenges Public Works has had over the last couple of years in delivering projects. So one of my big missions over the last 4 months has been to make some strategic changes in our organization so we're a little bit better set up to deliver projects. And so I'm happy to report that we've been quite successful in doing that, and in a moment we'll talk a little bit about how that plays into the Senate Bill 1 program. So I think you have a version of this chart in the handout. Our first year project includes some site location culvert replacements and new culverts on county roads, and then we have a series of chip seal programs in the Valley Springs area, the Murphy's Ranch subdivision, in the Copperopolis area, and in Valley Springs. Maybe if we go to the next slide, I think it's probably as important to know what we're going to do as it is what those projects are. Next week, the county is going to issue a very comprehensive request for qualifications that will allow us to procure some additional consulting resources for public works projects, but also for facilities and some of the other county departments. It'll have a very short, probably 3-week turnaround time. So we will be able to procure the consultant resources that we need for SB1 projects essentially immediately after the close of that 21-day period and a brief ranking process. These aren't going to be difficult projects for us to design, if you will. Most of them, the chip seal ones, just need enough that we can pull a bid package together and then go out to bid. We won't be able to do the work this fall. We kind of hit day one of the rainy season today, but our intent would be over the December, January, February timeline, the consultant resources we procure will package our SB1 projects up into likely either one bundle or two. We'll go out to bid on those projects early in 2019. And the minute that we're kind of clear of weather, we'll have contractors on board to be able to do that work. We'll come back at another time and give you a more comprehensive update on some of our other programs, particularly ones with COG investment. But the same selection or the same solicitation for consultant resources will help us with the remaining FEMA and federal highway emergency relief projects, which I know particularly for the two supervisors is going to be terribly critical. Those do require a two-step solicitation process. So when we get those initial statements of qualifications back, we do have to do a quick proposal process with the qualified consultants because there's federal money involved in those. So it'll take us till close to the end of 2019 before those resources are fully on board. But again, we know that we need to have all of those projects out to bid and ready for construction by the middle of next summer as terms of our financing. The other thing that's important to note related to SB1 projects is when Public Works brought forward to the Board of Supervisors our first year SB1 program, I think there might have been a little consternation amongst the board that we had a relatively small pot of money, and we did the right thing in terms of ranking projects based on a qualitative index. The problem was when we shaved off the top rung of what we could afford in year one, it really wasn't very well geographically distributed amongst the county. So our intent is to bring back to the board for approval a year 2, 3, and maybe 4 program that's large enough sum of money that it could geographically kind of balance out through all of the supervisorial districts. I mean, the roads are in challenged condition in all 5 of the districts, and we want to make sure that all the communities feel a little bit of the Senate Bill 1 love. So we hope to have that program back to you before the end, back before the Board of Supervisors, before the end of 2019. Those same consultant resources that we're using to bundle up construction projects for the year 1 SB1 projects we'll get the year 2 projects out under the same time frame. So everything in year 1 and 2, all the dollars that we've received from the state, all of those projects we anticipate will be hitting the streets, literally and figuratively, as soon as the weather clears in the spring. And I'd be happy to answer any questions related to this. I have a couple of other things I'd like to comment on under the county's report.
Matt, as you know, some of those projects were quite large. We were in the $7 million range.
Yes.
With a couple of them, and they were priority projects. So trying to bundle up enough money to make that happen does leave all of the other districts at risk. So I'm glad to hear you mention that we need to get a better distribution on that and rethink that a little bit.
Yeah, that's always a challenge in the rural counties, as you know. I've worked up and down the Gold Country, so we'll bring back a program that deals with the worst roads first, but also provides some geographic equity.
And my statement was to to Mr. Krovitz a long time ago is that it doesn't matter where it is in the county, because we have to look at this in a holistic fashion of the county as a whole. And where the money is best suited to reduce the risk and reduce the cost of maintenance is the better answer, rather than pick a particular spot because it has a political connotation to it. So I still hold to that there's areas that have been let go simply because nobody had their focus on them.
No, I appreciate that. The one thing that I would contrast, going back to the slide Amber showed about how the road conditions deteriorate, you get below a pavement condition index of 50 or 55, the cost of trying to repair those then becomes greater. And we have roads across the county now that have degraded to beyond that point of cost-effective repair. And we could literally put up a dartboard with a map of county roads, and you'd be hard-pressed to hit a road that didn't need some work. So I think the geographic equity is just as important as trying to fix bad roads, because they're everywhere.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. So moving on to the proponents of Proposition 6, we thought it important to provide both sides of the argument here. So at the bottom, you can see the website there, voteforprop6.com. And these are what the repeal advocates say, that California has a high cost of living already. A new car and gas tax is regressive. It hits working and poor harder than wealthy. The advocates say that Sacramento has $16 billion budget surplus, and that should be used on transportation. And if the state spent all the fees and taxes towards transportation that were in place before SB1, then they would have $5.6 billion per year. There's a broad coalition opposed to Proposition 6, California League of Cities, California State Association and counties, California Alliance for Jobs. There's quite a few local jurisdiction associations here opposed to Proposition 6. You've heard quite a few of these through ours, but pro SB1 coalition, the No on Prop 6, say that this jeopardizes public safety. Poor roadways are factoring over 50% of the 3,623 fatalities that were on California roads in 2016. And this Proposition 6 halts roadway improvements that will save lives. They say it stops projects in every community. You saw all the projects in our community going on through SB1. Stops improvements in congestion relief. There's quite a bit of money towards congestion relief and trade corridors. Costs drivers more in the long run. They've calculated that on average drivers spend over $700 a year on car repairs due to bad roads, and clearly that depends on where you live. It's higher or it could be lower. And maintaining roads costs 8 times less than fixing roads, I think, as you saw earlier. And they did an economic report that SB1 generates $183 billion in economic activity and driver benefits, and creates and sustains over 60,000 jobs per year. Proposition 6, we did just a cursory analysis of regional and local impacts. Brought you data that we had, which is fiscal year 18-19 formulaic local streets and roads maintenance revenues for the city and county, and what it would look like with SB1, what it looks like without SB1. And as you can see on this chart, for the city, the SB1 revenues is a 42% increase in their local street and road maintenance revenues, and for the county, this is 50%. So what's that mean if these revenues go away? This is a 50% cut in road maintenance budgets that can go to deferred maintenance, and so continued payment deterioration. Annual revenue loss to transit with SB1, obviously 100% increase in the state of good repair funding, because that's a new funding source, and 126% increase in an existing funding source that goes towards operating funds. Loss of this funding could potentially mean in the future reduced or cut transit services. As this council is aware, a lot of the capital funding through Proposition 1B, the PTMISEA and Calaveras funding is gone now, and that was the main source of capital revenue for transit. So we would be looking towards existing operating revenues. So what the SB1 did in terms of increasing these revenues gave us a source for bus replacement funds and capital revenues. For the 10-year period, these are the estimates of funds to the Calaveras region. We've estimated about $40 million over 10 years that would go to city and county local street and road maintenance, over $2.5 million to public transit for operations and capital. For highway improvements, our regional transportation improvement program, which is one of the funding sources, we fund the wagon trail project with the SB1 stabilized that funding source, and then discretionary and competitive grants, so the active transportation program, the Caltrans shop program, planning grants, all the grant programs you saw earlier. And this is a very conservative estimate. Over 10 years, we estimated $10 million, but as you saw, we've already received about $4 million in those funding sources over a year and a half. So I would anticipate that being higher, but again, we were trying to be conservative. So what program implications this would have, we already talked about the street and road maintenance and public transit implications, but for highway improvements, there's just going to be less funds that can go towards accelerating more large-scale regional transportation improvements or towards leveraging funds. Long-range project impacts. Our regional transportation plan we just adopted a year ago identified over 300 projects in that plan in Calaveras County. It was a big list. Over $350 million of worth of projects didn't have future funding identified. And these project categories range from roadway capital, maintenance, bridges, transit, bike ped, and airport. So Prop 6 really would just limit our ability to either accelerate projects or take projects off the shelf. Prop 6 would also, reduce our leveraging potential. So SB1 introduced obviously new and augmented grant programs that then allow small agencies like us who have limited formula funds to compete for these competitive programs to augment our local funds here. And just an example is the Active Transportation Program is a statewide program for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. That's really the main source of funding that we have for bike ped improvements because most of our funding need to go to streets and roads. And so this program was doubled through SB1, and prior to SB1, we've had a really difficult time competing in that program. And then after SB1, the city was awarded $1.9 million for sidewalk improvements along SR 49. So just the additional influx of funding has definitely made that program more attainable for our small rural communities. And so the recommendation tonight, the executive management group has recommended that council consider taking a position on Proposition 6, the voter approval of gas and vehicle tax initiative. I think just due to the impacts to transportation funding. And I'll open it up for any questions the council may have.
So first off, I want to say thank you, Amber. This is a very detailed presentation. As we've spoken with Jim Jones previously on Prop 69 in May, the overall goal is an education process by the COG. We wanted to make sure people understood directly what the impact was both locally and statewide if this proposition passes and the impacts it would have. As with Prop 69, it is politically allowable for the council to take a position on a proposition. The executive management group recommends a no on Prop 6 position to be adopted by the council as a recommendation to our electorate. So with that, we are opening it up to questions. Do we have any council questions?
Not so much a question
comments?
as a comment. for anyone to think that the state needs to spend out their $16 billion surplus and remove the rainy day funds from the state coffers just because we're in a good economic time is very short-sighted. And secondly, my wife was always complaining about Paris Ferry Road on the Tuolumne side. Anybody who's driven it, they understand what I'm talking about. And after driving I-80 around the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, I can assure you that the roads in our county are in superb shape next to the interstates down in the Bay Area. We have serious infrastructure issues with major collector roads, even in the Bay Area, that have been ignored for years. And so to think that we're not impacted by what happens down there, we are. The third point is that the economic activity multiplier, it isn't so much the activity itself, but it's all of the other ancillary spending that occurs surrounding a particular project. And it does bleed into the community, if you want to use that term, in a very positive way. So I think that the best move here is to recommend a no on 6 at this time.
Further council comments?
I'd say that since the passage of Proposition 69, that makes me more in favor because it won't split up. You know, as usual, the biggest problem is always that the state uses the gas tax for other stuff. So that makes me feel more secure. And it's 100%.
Is there any public comment this evening? Mr. Caldwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being a former county engineer, and a life member of the County Engineers Association, I still get emails from CSAC. And I got several in the past 2 months regarding Prop 6. And one of the things they hit on were the myths that were being promoted by those supporting Proposition 6. And I, for one, would like to see this council here do what your executive director has suggested, and that's pass a resolution in opposition to Prop 6, because the myths that are being promoted, such as, for example, a couple, one is, you know, the general fund is going to take some of this money and spend it as they have in the past. And recently, I think everybody's aware, recently there have been a couple of measures, actually statewide propositions passed that constitutionally protect the fund. So it can't be done. And the other is these monies will be used for high-speed rail, the high-speed rail project. And that's not true either. Apparently, the project is going to be funded with, well, at least it's promoted this time as private money and federal money, ARROW money, and also some bond money, state bond money. And so there's no identification yet for SB1 funds to go toward that project. And I'm always, as I said, I'm always glad to see more money going to local agencies for transportation projects. And I noticed in the agenda tonight, there's this chart here, and you had a chart on one of your slides there, Calaveras County. Is this the same chart? It is the same chart, only in portrait instead of landscape?
But there's some other changes on it.
Or were they? Okay, I was provided an updated chart, so I'll update that material. So the one in the presentation was the most updated chart from the county.
You know what slide I'm talking about you had up there?
Yeah, you can go back here.
No,
So
it's not.
this one just reflects the 17-18 project list.
That's not the slide I was referring to. The slide I was referring to had probably 25 projects on it.
I think it's more detailed.
This one?
It's more detailed of this one. The one that's in the handout is a more detailed backup to the summary slide presentation here.
I'm sorry, what?
The page that you're referring to in the agenda packet is a more detailed backup to the summary information in that
Oh.
slide of our presentation this evening.
Okay, and I'm not all that familiar with SB1, and I'm curious with a lot of programs, as we all know, they give you deadlines by which you have to use the money. Does SB1 have, I realize that you have to turn in a report, the agency has to turn in a report that says, here's how we spent the money for the year, and here's how far along we are, whatever. Is there a provision in the SB1 monies that say that you must complete the project within a certain time frame or you lose the money?
Yes, please.
A lot of the different programs have accountability guidelines. For the local streets and roads, the counties and cities submit a list of projects that the funding will go towards. And because some of the projects might require multiple years of funding, there's no actual deadline, there's just reporting requirements for the cities and counties.
So it was mentioned by Mr. Boyer about year one and year two. So if you've essentially, I want to call it, programmed a project for year two, if you don't complete it in year two using SB1 money, do you lose the funds?
There's reporting requirements that they have to report on the status of the projects. So I don't know if
I said that already.
Mr. Boyer has any additional information on the actual requirement if that occurs. But I think they're trying to give the cities and counties as much flexibility as possible on putting these funds towards the most needed projects. And I think the state recognizes the needs vary with each jurisdiction, and clearly, some projects cost more than just 1 year of funding. So
As you know,
that's
I'm
as much information as I have. Yeah.
very interested in project delivery. And when non-project delivery happens, I stand here before you and chide the agency. So if there's some sort of provision in the use of SB1 funds that says if you don't use it in a certain time frame, you lose it, I think that ought to be beat into the agencies that receive the money. Thank you.
Is there any further public comment? Is there any further council comment?
Yes, I'd like to clarify page 102. This is the highlighted, the yellow highlighted section there. If you recall, the reason those two are highlighted is because they could become critical need very quickly. Parrots Ferry, it's a situation where we're monitoring the potential embankment failure there. But that is a critical infrastructure road to Sonora for District 3 as well as District 4. But whether or not it's going to be required in the next fiscal year is an open-ended question. It just really hinges on what happens. If you drive the road, you'll see the start of the failure. So I know that Public Works is aware of it. It's just a monitoring phase at this time, if I'm not mistaken. But if it should fail, we're in a different game instantly with our funds. So I just wanted to make that point. That's why they're highlighted in yellow.
If I might, Chair,
You may.
just a little bit of additional clarification on it. So essentially the distinction between that table and the one that's in your agenda packet, that isolates the first year SB1 projects that were part of the Board of Supervisors approval. The larger list was that ranked list that we did in sort of from a criteria-based standpoint. The board didn't approve the second or subsequent years of that list. So it gives you some context of the way that we initially reported to the state. But the only projects that the board has officially approved are those. And we would completely agree with Mr. Caldwell that delivery of those projects and all other projects is absolutely critical.
Further council comment?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I agree with the recommendation made by the council, but my concerns are that, number one, there are no carve-outs on SB1 as mentioned by our public speaker. I know that we have said that there are guarantees. Well, I'm here to make sure those guarantees are in place. And I'm very interested in the additional opportunities to bring in apprenticeship programs using the SB1 money in our road maintenance programs and our repair programs. It gives us an opportunity to expand on that. 10-year project. I would like to see that sustained revenue come in and put to good use. And I want to make sure that happens. So I would be in agreement with the executive recommendation.
Any further council comment? We are looking for an official recommendation to oppose Proposition 6 from this council. Do we have a motion to oppose Proposition 6?
So move.
We have Councilmember Herman. Second.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Second by Councilmember Oliveira. Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Thank you, council. Item number 9, our Caltrans report.
Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Gregoria Fonse, California Department of Transportation. I just have a few items to share that have come up across our offices, as well as some follow-up items. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. We received an inquiry for the city of Angels Camp in getting a radar trailer set up on the north end of town on State Route 49. It was brought to our attention that there were some speeding issues. We shared with the contact, I believe it's Amy Augustine for the city. The standards have to be consistent with traffic control device standards. And we also provided standard plans and additional information so that she could base her decision-making and process. And we've also identified for her an encroachment permit contact so she can proceed in terms of furthering her questions and going through that process. In terms of San Andreas, lights not working, that was brought to our attention for Russell's Road to Mountain Ranch Road. Lights were out, and it was unclear who would take ownership of that in terms of repair, and it appears that that'll be the county, and we provided information for county contact on that. Highway 4, Tom Bell Road, we were looking at signal operations that was seemed to be pretty short, so we actually went out there, and we believe we've addressed the issue. So as folks use this intersection, I'm sure we'll be hearing more, but that has also been addressed. I was reviewing some information with regards to the main street between 26 and 49 and folks using that as a cutoff, and I believe there was some dialogue with regards to discussing how to modify movements along Main Street, either on one end or the other for that. We now at this time have a Caltrans project manager point of contact for Calaveras, so depending on what the board or various offices would like to proceed with, that information can be pursued with Mimi Hui to discuss that, kind of sit down and have that discussion to further unpack it. It certainly wouldn't be something here, but I just wanted to let you know there is an avenue to discuss that, and I've provided that contact information to your Office of the Executive Director for that. What else? Oh, guardrail safety study just past Murphy's. We're in field reviews. Safety investigation is underway. We foresee having that in November, and as soon as that's available, we'll go ahead and disclose that. We had a crosswalk inquiry, State Route 49 in St. Charles, and I guess this has kind of been on and off the radar, so to speak. We have actually already a safety investigation for that area. We also have other investigations from the same request out of the Office of the Executive Director. That investigation is still underway for that particular area and several other intersections. And once that investigation is concluded, we'd be happy to go ahead and disclose that information as well. The other crosswalks, I believe, are Treat Avenue, California, and Russell Road. I think at this time, that's all I have.
Okay. Council comments?
I know that we had discussed in the last meeting, I didn't, but one of the directors did, about the speed changes in San Andreas. Is that still an ongoing?
Absolutely. We received an initial request for a reevaluation, and our Deputy for Traffic Operations addressed that initial request. A second request came forward for additional changes within that area, and at this time we're evaluating that additional request, and we're conferring with CHP at this time.
Okay.
I don't have more information than that, but once that comes forward, we'll be going back to the table to discuss that.
Excellent.
But so it is ongoing, so.
I'd like to give Caltrans kudos too for the quick work at the Vista Point on Highway 4 near Telegraph. Trash, and an enormous amount of trash. In fact, so much trash that your PIO contacted me and said, we have to get some heavy equipment out here. So evidently it was quite the show. So thank you for the quick response. I know they turned that around within 24 hours of the outreach that I did to them. So that's excellent. And I know constituents have already fed back how quickly it was responded to. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the excellent follow-up on Tom Bell and Highway 4. I received multiple calls and emails. So.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Mr. Chair, quick questions. Highway 4 Tom Bell, we received some information, not through Caltrans, but they had actually addressed that and increased the timing of the green lights by 10 seconds. In those traffic studies, that could mean an extra 10 cars, if you will. So I appreciate the efforts, and that came out of your Roseville office, your inspectors there. Not to switch horses, but when you mention investigations, say here in San Andreas, I'm speaking for Supervisor Toffenel now, your investigations, do they include traffic count studies and pedestrian count studies during times of days? I mean, does it go to that extent?
They do, and it depends on what type of traffic investigation is underway. In this case, for example, if it's a crosswalk, we'll be looking at PED. Or we'll be looking at motorized, but we'll also be looking at non-motorized as well. So again, it's dependent on the study.
I was in town I think it was last evening or evening before, and I noticed we had a wheelchair and the darkness, and it was very hard to see. We definitely need some crosswalks there, some type of pedestrian aids. Thank you for your efforts.
And I have one. Last night at our city council meeting, we had multiple complaints about our lights at 149 and at Murphy's Grade. Light intersection, the right-hand turn light on each is not staying green, and there's some kind of delay. I'm hoping maybe you could look into that and maybe work with report, maybe if not back to council, city staff, to see how to get that resolved. But it's been backing up the traffic at both intersections.
That's 49 and Murphy's Grade Road?
49, both of them, 4 and 49, and then Murphy's Grade, next to Mike's.
I will take that back.
Lastly, I want to say thank you on the rumble strips. It appears that there's a more intelligent methodology on the fog line where they're putting rumble strips in on the fog line if there's a shoulder for the bicycles to stay to the right. But if it's a short or non-existent shoulder by the fog line, they're not putting that rumble strip in. And I think going from here to Jackson, Moke Hill, It's a much safer ride now, and hopefully the riders will come back.
We're hoping so as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10, county report. Mr. Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. Following up on 2 items in the Caltrans report, I actually just got an email this afternoon, and thanks to District 10 for quickly responding to this council and Public Works' request to reevaluate the State Route 49 south end of town speed limit signs. They have concurred, CHP's concurred with our recommendations to adjust them to be closer to what they used to be. And we'd be happy to bring back some additional information on that. But they're simply writing the work order and waiting for the maintenance crews to be able to do that install. We've also been working with the Moke Hill community on some targeted rumble strips on Main Street that are intended to be part and parcel to the work Caltrans is looking at on the state highway intersection. So between their strategies and ours, hopefully we can slow some people down through the community. A couple of other quick things. I'm pleased to say that Joshua Pack will be the new Public Works Director. His first day is a week from Monday on the 15th. The county administrative officer has given me the green light to stay on for about 4 to 5 weeks on a part-time basis to overlap with him so that some of the new things that we're still putting in place can actually get cemented in and carried to the finish line. So he and I will have some overlap in our time together. He's excellent. I can speak both for my past knowledge of him, my knowledge of him, and his reference checks. But what's really solid is all the people that have been asking me who the new director is, when they find out if they have any experience with him at all, speak extraordinarily highly of him. Josh grew up in Nevada County, so he's got Gold Country roots. The Gold Country's been the target of most of my consulting and professional work for agencies. And that our communities are just different. They're different than the Bay Area, they're different from the far north part of the state, they're different from the Central Valley where I grew up. So the fact that he's got those roots, after he graduated college, he is a registered engineer. He worked for several cities in the South and East Bay, Pleasanton, I think Pittsburgh, and maybe Livermore. But he, when he started his family, moved back to Nevada County, and he's been up there essentially in a very similar position, a deputy director position there. Has very extremely broad experience both in capital project delivery and in road maintenance. So I think you will be well served as commissioner or council members as well as the community. And one other person that you've seen here before, but we've given her a slightly new role in our department, is Kelly Zonheiser. So one of the things that I've been working on over the last 4 months is kind of restoring some overt functions that were always part of Public Works, but maybe got lost in the org chart, got lost with all the disasters, some of our inability to recruit for some vacant positions. So one of those was traffic engineering. One of the reasons we've been able to respond to no parking requests, always stop sign requests, do the same kind of evaluations that Caltrans was referencing, is because we brought back a retired annuitant who's been able to train up our staff on how to do those, do them in a time-efficient way, start making some of those changes. I think that's been extraordinarily effective. Another function that Kelly now is stepping in, we kind of lost our ability I think we forgot that we needed to have an actual department liaison to other organizations. So Kelly not only is the liaison to the advisory committee for council, she will be, unless Josh decides something different, to this council. We've encouraged and caused the restart of a utility coordination committee on a countywide basis, which is where the road departments get together with utilities and actually strategically plan, hey, we were going to overlay that road. Why don't you do your underground utility work the year before we do it instead of the year after? And so Kelly's the liaison to that function, to some of the COG grant-funded projects. Historically, it's always fallen to the Public Works Director to be the liaison to COG for the COG studies. The challenge is, in a county of this size, the Public Works Director doesn't necessarily have the time to give meaningful and consistent input to those studies. And so frankly, it's kind of fallen to the planning department. Peter Mauer's done a great job of being a liaison, but he thinks about things more from a community development standpoint. Public Works can represent more the nuts and bolts of the transportation system. So hopefully we'll see a lot more of Kelly, and we'll try to keep our communication with your council more consistent from this point forward. And lastly, I think Josh would intend to come back and give you a broader update on all the COG-funded projects in Public Works, so you can get sort of a, project by project, this is where we're at, this is what you can expect, these are some of the challenges, these are some of the good newses. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you,
At this time, it is 6:32, and so we are going to recess the Calaveras Council of Governments meeting, and we will have the Calaveras Transit Agency meeting start. So I apologize, Melissa, but if you can bear with us here for a few moments, I don't think this will be a very long agenda. So we've recessed the Calaveras Council of Governments meeting. We are now calling to order the Calaveras Transit Agency meeting of October 3rd, 2018. The first item is the consent agenda. And I just want to make sure the council's had the time to switch agenda packages. For the Calaveras Transit Agency, consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or interested party may request that an item be removed from the council consent agenda for further discussion. There is one item, the regular meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion to move and approve the regular meeting minutes under consent. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
I need to abstain, and also we need to change that other second. I was not here in the last meeting, and then it dawned on me that the minutes were the consent agenda, and so it needs to be Dennis who made the second.
We thought we heard you yelling all the way from Angels Camp.
Make that two, John.
What's that?
Abstain.
Okay, so approve 402.
You abstain.
Okay.
With declaration, Mr. Chair, I watched the video.
Okay, thank you. All right. Our regular agenda item number 2 is public comment for the Calaveras Transit Agency. 5 minutes per person. Comments shall be limited to items that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency and not on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment for the Calaveras Transit Agency? Seeing none. Our third item is resolution number fiscal year 19-5, adopting the Transit Asset Management Plan for the Calaveras Transit Agency. I believe that is Ms. Collins.
Great, thank you. The Transit Asset Management Plan is a new requirement for Federal Transit Administration funding. Calaveras Transit receives FTA funding. They call it Section 5311, which is for rural areas for operating funds. And it's quite a significant source for us for operations. The Transit Asset Management Plan was established as a system to monitor and manage transportation assets to improve safety and increase reliability and performance and establish performance measures. This is the first year the TAM plan is due for agencies, and as you can see in the attachment A, it includes a listing of our fleet, the useful life benchmarks, and a rough replacement schedule for our transit fleet. If we had any transit facilities, they would be included in this transit asset management plan, but Calaveras Transit does not own or manage any facilities. Our operations facility is leased by the operations contractor. So what you see in this plan is just our revenue vehicles and our one equipment truck we have for maintaining the bus shelters. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the Transit Asset Management Plan.
Council.
Glad to see a policy.
Any public comment? Seeing none, this is a motion to approve a resolution. Do we have a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Mills, seconded by Councilmember Muniz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Item number 4, the Calaveras Transit Agency Monthly Performance Report. Ms. Collins.
This is a standing item that we have every month. It's an information item. I didn't have anything additional to add to this, so if the council has any questions on this item, I'd be happy to answer some questions.
How does this stack against last year?
We are running relatively similar. I mean, I think we're slightly up this month, but it looks very similar to last year's numbers.
So the route time changes, are we starting to see an effect?
Not this last month. So the route changes were in September 4th. They were instituted in September. So,
we'll see
we'll probably see a shift here amongst these different routes from that change in September. So next month we'll see September's.
It'd be very interesting to see what that stability of that new route timing system does in terms of ridership.
Any further council comments? Any public comment? Okay. Staff reports. Is there a staff report?
There are no staff reports. I have nothing additional to report.
All right, that concludes the Calaveras Transit Agency regular meeting agenda. The next meeting of the Council of the Transit Agency will be on November 7th at 6:30 here in these chambers. With that, we will reconvene the Calaveras Council of Governments meeting with item number 11, Angels Camp City report. Seeds.
Okay, I am here with nothing to report officially, but I do want to say, I know it's been some time since I've been here, so it's good to see everybody again. But not seeing me is actually a good thing because I have complete faith in all of the decisions and things that have been made. So when it gets to this point, as far as city staff is concerned, we haven't had any questions or concerns about the items considered by this group. So it's a great thing, and we're busy at the city. We've got a lot of things going on. But I do tonight want to thank the Council of Governments because of all the things that we do have going on. The COG has helped us out in two very instrumental ways. The first is just as I was transitioning to city administrator, they were helping us with the procurement process for our Murphy's Grade Road project. So now we have received notification from Caltrans that we are the lucky winner of an audit on that procurement. And so I am incredibly grateful for the resources. You have a contract transportation planner. So I am incredibly grateful for those resources and that the COG has, that the city and county are able to utilize because with his help and with their help earlier, I'm confident that we will pass with flying colors. So the other area where the COG has been very helpful to city and helping us during this transition is we are moving towards a contract city engineer. And one of the requirements that we will have is making sure that that contract engineer can oversee Caltrans FHWA projects. And so we've reached out to Amber and the COG and your contract planner, and they are helping us create, the procurement process by which we are compliant with FHWA. So my thanks to you guys for your support and for your contract planning staff because they are really, really valuable to us as the local jurisdiction. And this is definitely where the resources and the skill set lies in those areas. So we appreciate being able to rely upon them. So I'm happy to answer any questions. My goal is to come back when you guys do quarterly reports and give you a detailed update on where we stand on all of our COG-funded projects, and then also working with staff because I happen to love the COG CIP. And so one of the things that we want to do is start getting our staff trained in inputting that information so that when you get those quarterly reports, you don't have to see me giving the update. You'll see a percentage of work complete on those quarterly reports. So just small goals for right now, but nonetheless goals. But I'm happy to answer any questions. And like I said, not seeing me is a really great thing because I have complete confidence in your agendas, the decision making, and Amber's leadership. But again, thank you. Yes.
You said not seeing you. I've seen you more than any other city administrator.
Oh, well, good.
So it's good to have that,
Good.
that connection, because there has to be that
Yeah.
relationship between the city and the county and COG to make everything work right.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your flexibility with conference calls through executive management. So, yeah, thanks for making it easy to participate. But thank you. Any other questions you might have for me?
It's good seeing you again, Melissa.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. I have complete confidence and faith. So I feel like you guys are kind of one of the areas I worry about least. And so we're just focusing time and resources and attention in some other critical areas of the city. But yeah, so thank you.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thanks.
Agenda item number 12, transit report.
I keep forgetting that is us also. You'll see the CIP report there. You'll see some progress made. This reflects, I believe this reflects the recent invoices from the county on their completion of the bus shelter lighting project and then the phase 4 improvement project. Again, I think as mentioned, staff is currently reviewing the remaining funds and will develop a plan to bring back to you for expenditure of the remaining PTM-ACA capital funds.
And item number 14, staff reports.
As typical every month, I provided a written report of updates on all the various projects and funding grant applications that we've submitted recently, but I don't have any additional information to add to that unless the council has any questions.
Council. Okay. Again, I want to thank you. I think the backup to this answers a lot of questions we otherwise would have, and it's a great summary to have monthly, and I'm glad you're doing it. So, all right, item number 15, for those of you who want to go watch the rest of the Yankees game. We will now be adjourning the Council of Governments meeting here at 20 to 7. Our next meeting is on November 7th at 5:30 in these chambers. Thank you. Go A's.
Good job, gentlemen and ladies.